Monetary Cooperation for America and Asia. Lessons from the past, issues for the future, as usual. Well, and it is my great pleasure to give the floor to Christian Gimmers, who was introduced yesterday, but let me say he's vice chairman of the Robert Triffin Institute, president of the Interdisciplinary Institute of Relation between Europe and Latin America and Caribbean. It was a task that provided him lots of experience and expertise in these issues. Was professor of the School of Management in Brussels also, and this cooperation with Latin America and the corner of Africa, maybe perhaps here present. And there is also a link to the Joint Vienna Institute. So please, you have the floor.
So, ladies and gentlemen, Mrs. Chair and dear colleagues, allow me to start with an historical reference, because we are here in a very special piece of the Enlightenment, the Portuguese Enlightenment. And I would like to pay a tribute to the founder of this Academy of Science, José Correa da Serra. José. Excuse me, my Spanish. Thanks, George. So I was just mentioning him because I could imagine that most of you have never listened about this brilliant representative of the European Enlightenment. And he was the founder of this Academy of Science. Of course, on that time, he has to leave the country and even Europe due to the circumstances, but he was a very brilliant representative. He was a priest, but he was also a Freemason. He was in close contact with Thomas Jefferson in the US, and Jefferson referred to him as the most brilliant and erudite person he ever met in his life. So Jefferson was very cautious with the compliment, and it deserves to be mentioned. Well, I stop here. For going back to our more practical aspect. Well, very quickly, we know, and we already listened about this trend, a new trend of our monetary regionalism, due to the fact that instability, macroeconomic instability, and geopolitical context make these options something attractive more than a few years ago. For emerging country and LDC, this is an opportunity, but with a lot of risk. The risk to contribute to fragmentation and maybe to protectionism, which would be, of course, not a good news. It is not yet the case, but so I see this as a positive opportunity, in as much as it is a lever for quickly restoring monetary cooperation and most of all to spur regional integration in a lot of regions where integration is too low, like Africa and Latin America. What are the conditions to meet? This is the object of my speech, and insisting that the method is the most important aspect. Because my experience at my technical level show that essentially the problem relies in what it is named the prisoner dilemma. the fact that the decision maker have an individual rationality which is contrary to the collective one or to the regional one, because the incentives are not good because there is distrust among them. So the solution is very logically to implement some devices able to make them to communicate better and to know each other in order to rebuild trust. This is a logical method that I will show in some concrete example. And this comes from my modest experience as a low-key technician in the EU experiment, especially the path towards the euro and the conversions, but also in Africa, in several parts of Africa, and in Latin America, a little bit on the Eastern Europe too. So yesterday I made just a quick link with the result of yesterday's discussion. The cause of the emergence of this new kind of monetary arrangement at regional level are, of course, the instability, the reaction to the dollar spillovers, and also some geopolitical other aspects, among them the weaponization of the US dollar. Very important in my analysis are the new technologies, which could change fundamentally the kind of monetary arrangement and especially lowering their costs. But essentially, we could see that we are just two relevant facts. These increasing trends to use local currencies for cross-border payment link, especially in Asia, with a strategy of a very voluntary strategy of internalization of the renminbi as a reserve and also as an invoicing currency. So yesterday we already discussed, and I present my thesis that this is not a genuine de-dollarization, although this de-dollarization is inevitable and is even desirable. But with the risk that if it's for keeping in a system of national key currency, the result would be worse for instability and so on. We already discussed that. Because this would merely reproduce the flaw in the present system. So instability would result, and the reason I already explained is that basically for solving the Triffin dilemma, we need to invent new form of issuing safe assets, because no national single currency or multiple key currency would be able to issue adequate safe assets with stability, because we need, in a national key currency system, we need economies accepting to be the debtor of last resort. And up to now, only the US economy was able to do it with some positive and negative effects. We already discussed it. But I don't see a possibility to have more than one major economy in such a deficit with some stability. It would be worse with 2 or 3 other big economies in deficit. And anyway, I insist on that. The present system makes us impossible to finance decarbonization in the world. For me, this is the most important pressure to change the system, is the fact that we need to decarbonize very quickly, and we are doing almost nothing up to now. So I don't be back on this, but this is fundamental for me. So how could this new regional monetary arrangement become an agent of change, and also for solving the Triffin dilemma? Logically, there are just two steps. The first one is to spur regional integration. And after that, if we have in the rest of the world multipolar regional integration mechanism, it would be much easier to make coalition for changing the system and to make to the hegemon to understand that he has to share the power in its own interest. So step one, this arrangement as a catalyzer of integration. The proof that it works is basically the fact that cooperation is easier now with, first of all, between neighboring countries or like-minded economies. The proof is the fact that these agreements are in a process of development. Of course, external factors are playing a role, like to try to lessen the dependency upon the dollar or things like that, or to reduce instability. How these arrangements could have a positive role for regional integration? Well, on this aspect, this is not so much economics, it's more sociology or human aspect. It's merely because once you put and you oblige technicians to meet on a regular basis and with continuity, you create group dynamics which allow them to communicate better and to build progressively the trust which was missing. And this is easier among technicians because by definition, and allow me to say this in provocative terms, but with diplomats, forget about. Diplomats have a very important function, but not for making integration. And also minister, sorry for George, it's even worse. If you put minister together, this couldn't lead you to integration, but to intergovernmental very bad things with bad results. While if you reverse the sequencing, let's start with technicians, with experts from national countries, but make them free to speak, close the door. Then communication improve very quickly, and I have experiments showing and demonstrating that. And then their report and their information flowing towards their own minister or towards the council for decision making, then the picture becomes to change. So the order, the sequencing is very important. I will show you historical example. And this is an accelerator of economic cooperation because people understand each other better and they'll build some kind of trust. And then they could dare to start to monitor the national policy, to monitor, for example, the neighbor policy, which is delicate because these decisions are sovereign decisions. But you have to make them, to put them in a condition that they could dare to speak and to criticize, to play the role of checks and balances, which are often missing, especially in countries like Latin America or Africa. So the regional dimension could play the role of checks and balances, which are insufficiently developed inside each country. So the regional aspect, the regional dimension gives a specific role to improve governance. This is fundamental for making integration to work. Why is it so easy, according to what I pretend to demonstrate? This is not economics. This is not even political science. It is much more basic. It's a human being in its role of communication. And human beings, they tend to cooperate when they face a difficulty. So, monetary arrangement could be the first steps to enforce a way to give the power, in the first instance, to the technicians. Because a diplomat or a minister, except George, couldn't be competent. So please do not single me out, okay? Thanks, George. Thanks, Jorge. Well, for the first recipe I would promote is to give a free mandate in the first step, not for decision making, but for just analyzing the facts. Give free mandate to the macroeconomists, both from central bank and from treasury. Put them together, and then the cocktail has a lot of chance to be good. Important to mention that technicians are not allowed to decide anything, because this would be undemocratic and very dangerous. Technicians have just to analyze and to wrap up what their minister is able to understand. And this is a big job. And if you do that, 90% of success ensured, according to my experience. Why monetary arrangements are so important? Because you start with a key aspect, which is to monitor exchange rate development. And to do that, as a technician, you are obliged very quickly to analyze each policy mix. And if you are allowed to do that confidentially, I mean closed-door meeting between these technicians from fiscal leg and monetary leg, you have an amazing result of checks and balances, because they dare to say things which cannot be told in public and which minister couldn't dare to tell to their colleagues. But technicians used to do it. Personal experiences. So you could reach among technicians first a coordination which is perceived as being in the self-interest of each participant. And these participants will have the task to make this to be understood by their minister and their national authorities. And of course, if you have element of reaction to external factors, like aggression or financial instability or dollar spillover, this will help. And we are in the case. So the empirical proof, I start with reminding something which is often forgotten, even by historians, that the European integration process didn't start with a custom union or with some sector like iron and steel. This was the second step. The first step was monetary. It was the EPU, the European Payment Unit. And this is very important because this was a kind of monetary arrangement very similar to what is occurring now in Africa or in Latin America and even in Asia. Look, in the historical case, and is it a casualty that it was the same Robert Triffin who put in place, on the technical aspect, the EPU at the OECD, with the Marshall Fund. So you have the two components of the cocktail. One is to be on the technical level as it used to be, and the second element is to have a carrot, to have, in our case, the Marshall Fund, to have a collective stock of money. It was a grant. In our case, we had this chance. It was a pure grant. It was not a debt, not a financial debt, another kind of debt, but it was an historical chance. And the technician had to propose how to use this grant. So I repeat, two elements: technicians, closed-door meeting, and a carrot. How to manage this the most rationally as possible. And this is, for me, the interpretation of the European integration success, viewed as a dynamic process of progressive construction. From money to trade, custom union, and then to policy, and finally the single currency. But the single currency was already in the Triffin's plan at the end of the 40s. So this is the history. Now, the two key elements I already mentioned: a regular collegial technical expert meeting closed door with a carrot. Two key lessons: in fact, to reverse the traditional order of international negotiation, which used to pass from foreign affairs, diplomats, or finance minister. These are the decision maker. They are legitimate, but they don't have to intervene before to have the technical analysis in good hands. And the second lesson is to have to monitor collegially at regional level the impact of each national policy. This creates the sense of a team facing common objective or common difficulties. And each technician has to convince a minister, which is not a simple thing. Two key results. The most important is not economics, it's personal contacts, and to build mutual trust. And then you could escape the prisoner dilemma at regional level. And this dilemma is also the reason why we are not able to start with a multilateral agreement at this moment. Geopolitical conditions don't allow this to take reality. So we have to start where it's easier, the regional level. And the second element is that I observe sociologically a dynamic process based upon emulation among the technicians, because they are taking value and they create some kind of competitive cooperation, because each technician has to improve the level of the discussion. There is a run to be the best. Always close the door, very important. So, three other case studies. The process of convergence towards the euro was a magnificent demonstration in the European case, but a very, very slow process. Too slow, because we, the European, we were on that time in an affluent position, able to waste time. I say that because I had the opportunity to see very concretely at the CFA level for the two areas, when I was asked by the two governors to help them to redraft the treaty and to produce the UMOA on one side and the CEMAC on the other side. So I was part of this process, and I saw that our African colleagues are much better. And when I say much better, I could even give you a quantitative idea. What I saw in 2 years was as efficient as we in Europe, we spent 30 years to get the same level of group dynamics and trust among the technicians. Unfortunately, the ministerial levels is still back, but we could restart, and I convinced that my African colleagues have the potential to make them to understand, because situations are also different. And the third experiment, where it was also a marvelous demonstration of the human aspect, was my experience with the REDIMA project. The Diálogo Macroeconómico in Spanish. So the network of macroeconomic dialogue, no cooperation, but no coordination, because coordination would imply a level which in fact is a total illusion, because even in Europe, we don't have a genuine coordination. What we have is an efficient dialogue, it's not the same. And with the REDIMA that I manage at CEPAL, in a CEPAL function, ECLAC in English, I could organize these monitoring groups. So each time, 2 high-level technicians, but no politicians, no diplomats, and no member of ministerial cabinet, because they are legitimate after the report from the technicians. One from the Treasury, one from the Central Bank, but pure macroeconomists, technicians, no political, no political agents. They have, I repeat, a very important legitimate role, because they are responsible for taking decision, but not for making analysis. It looks a little bit caricatural, but 40 years of experience at a low-key level, which give you a better view of what is occurring than from above, from the balcony. Proposals based upon these experiences. First of all is to create the same kind of monetary committee that we used to be, with central bank and treasury. Important to have the continuity. So you couldn't work with group dynamics if you have a turnover of the people participating to this technical work. High confidentiality, for example, Chatham Rule, or even more, and to report regularly, collegially to the Council of Ministers. Of course, each expert will report confidentially to his minister. And this is very important, because the minister will see very quickly that it's privileged information, and is getting more powerful with this information when he faced his regional colleagues. So it's always the personal incentive of human being which is playing the most important role. Then, necessarily to start by monitoring exchange rate, because this allows you to dare to criticize the neighbor policies. If not, it would be an insult. And I insist that new technologies, and when we have this final step of the implementation of CBDC, so central bank digital currencies, it will be spectacular, because with tokenization, and technology now allows that, it would become very easy, for example, to create private SDR without cost. So a multilateral reserve currency, which is the most efficient, because almost no exchange risk between the dollar and the other currencies, by definition of a basket. 2 weeks, I am reaching the end. So basically, the idea would be to propose that those regional monetary funds and activity will be managed with respect to SDR. Not necessarily this, but as an objective. A general tokenization using CBDC, and then you could imagine if the sub-region of Latin America, or the whole Latin America and Caribbean, and the whole Africa would be able to have this kind of coordinated action, all using SDR, the picture and the power relation will change at the global level. And then my thesis is that very quickly the hegemon, which is not stupid, be careful, not stupid at all, will understand where its advantage are. Thank you very much, Mrs. Chair, and, and Georges.
Well, and now we will have a contribution from a field which is law and aspects related with, how may I say, juridical environment. I introduce Rodolfo Lavrador, Executive International Business Director of BNU at Macau, because the bank still is there, and it comes from colonial times. He was General Manager and Head of International Business at the Portuguese bank, Caixa Geral de Depósitos. So thank you for your participation. You have the floor.
You should also mention that he was a Secretary of State to a Minister of Finance who was not called Jorge.
Thank you very much. I apologize for missing this very important aspect.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody, and first of all, thank you for the invitation. So I was basically asked to share how Macau positions itself in the eventual process of cooperation, monetary cooperation around China. So I would say that I should start with some disclaimers, in the sense that BNU is basically a commercial bank, even due to those colonial times, and it was able, when was the handover of Macau, and in those times one of the chairmen of BNU is here in the room, is Carlos Tavares. He recalls this better than myself for sure. It was possible to BNU remain jointly with Bank of China as an issue bank also in Macau. But being an issue bank doesn't mean that is the entity that has the monetary power or has the monetary policy in Macau. Those are jobs, those are things that are done by the monetary policy maker of authority in Macau. So, first of all, I would say that we can only share our views from a point of view of a commercial bank. It's correct that it's one of the leading banks in Macau, but just from that point of view, so I would say that my approach is going to be, so to say it, a little more pragmatic and less academic or theoretical in this regard. As you know, although Macau has its own currency, which is Pataca, I would say that is obviously to everyone that any position from Macau in this regard in terms of any monetary cooperation in Asia will, as in many other issues, will very much depend on what's going to be the policy and decision from the Chinese authorities of mainland China. Today, if we see the program of the monetary authority in Macau, things are in the short term very much focused in the digitalization of the currency, which is pretty much aligned with which is also the policy regarding the digitalization of the renminbi in China. Basically, the government of Macau, in terms of the financial sector and the currency, it is very focused in prioritizing the bond market in Macau, also improving the legal framework, enhancing more effective payment systems, and also trying to attract more asset management companies. But I think that the most important things to retain, and I'm repeating myself in that regard, is that the position of Macau in any process of monetary cooperation, which will be always pending of China, and of course what Macau can offer to China and to that process, what it can add and what it can be differentiated in that terms. In taking that into consideration, I would say that one of the perspectives that is very much clear to Macau authorities and also to Chinese authorities, that Macau, there is always this goal to work as the facilitator of the cooperation between China and the Portuguese-speaking countries, not only Portugal, but also all the other ones. I would say that somehow, how we can see it from Macau is very similar. We have to see how China is seeing this kind of process. In that regard, our personal view is that China remains with a great interest in the process of the internationalization of the renminbi. I think that is the key issue in all that everything that has to do with any kind of monetary cooperation. So I think that China is still looking forward to have the acceptance of the renminbi in the trade, and especially in Asia, but also in a more general way. And we can say it in the very specific issues, because if you looked at the work of the last months of the Banks Association of Macau, authorities have that view, the need of international monetary institutions on which China can have a prevalent role. In this regard, I think that Macau can have a role, and we have some signs of that role, such as the creation of the offshore market of Macau in terms of the bonds markets. Even recently, the president of the Monetary Authority in Macau mentioned the ambitions of transforming the financial sector of Macau on a platform that could link continental China with the world, and that could be a way to add the internationalization of the renminbi. In that sense, the government of Macau has been defending to have an enhanced financial sector in Macau, not only to be useful in this goal of China of the internationalization of the renminbi, but also due to a very important domestic reason. It is the need to diversify the economy in Macau that is too much focused in the gambling sector. So that is clear that to the local authorities, one of the objectives is to have a more important financial sector in Macau. In that sense, there is this long-term ambition of creating a stock exchange in renminbis in Macau. But for the time being, it was created a Marco Connect Financial Asset Exchange, which is basically a market where there are certificates that are listed, not bonds or shares, but just certificates that allow or enable the investors to have a part of the profits of the small and micro companies, and this is the way to try to attract international investment to Chinese corporates. But I think that we have also other signs of the interest of China in the promotion of monetary cooperation, as we can see as the fact that China is one of the actors of important stability mechanisms, such as the Chiang Mai initiative, the CMI, and after that with the plus of the multilateralization with the CMIM. Also with the creation of the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, which is, as you know, linked with the One Belt, One Road initiative, and also by the fact of China being a part of the Asian Monetary Union. So I would say, to finalize, that China and Macau, by drag from China, will be for sure an active actor in the process of more intense monetary cooperation, if with that China could achieve a more dominant monetary position between the Asian countries and could exercise a larger influence at the international level through the utilization of the power of the renminbi. So, of course, this is not going to be easy. I think it is not realistic to think that it was going to be possible, at least a short term, to have any kind of a monetary union in that region of the world. Even the possibility of the MU could go from a currency basket to a currency will depend in very difficult issues, not only having the expertise close in the room, for sure that as well, but of course there are many problems that are not easy. First of all and foremost, political willingness, but also the need to have more economic convergence, the need to have a more developed institutional structure, because I think it is not possible to have a process of monetary cooperation without collective institutions. Also, there is need some popular support, and of course, as everything in the world, it will be very much depending on geopolitical issues and economic global issues. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, it is. Well, thank you. And now we will have a new presentation, because we will collect the questions at the end as we have lunch. And it's my pleasure to introduce Manuel Leptão. He's finishing his PhD in international issues, senior technical advisor at Multilateral Directorate of Portuguese Foreign Office for Cooperation, in the context of the countries of Portuguese language, manager for technical assistance in several companies, namely consulting companies, and an expert in defense and sustainable development issues. So we have a lot to learn about these questions. So thank you for coming. You have the floor.
Good afternoon. I would like to start to thank the organizers for convening this important event and for inviting CPLP to attend. I must say and confess I'm a little bit worried and very uncomfortable in my shoes today, because when Professor Braga de Macedo and Professor Bernard Snoy sent the invitation, I told them clearly that this is not my area. I'm not an expert on these issues, but nevertheless, they didn't care, and they said, you must go and you should talk about what you know. And we want you to talk about CPLP and the relationship that CPLP has been implementing with these associated observers. So in order to start this presentation and to be on the spot, we have to start by something. And my starting point is the current understanding that has been already expressed by previous presenters during the day and yesterday, that the Bretton Woods institutions created 80 years ago remain pretty much the same. And for my perspective as a development expert, I would like to start talking about the World Bank and why the World Bank is important for this view and important for CPLP. If we look at the bank institutions, we can conclude that they remain as well much the same. The bank institutions continue to operate in the same way. IBRD continues to lend loans, IDA grants, IFC equity investments, and MIGA guarantees. The bank continues to receive public money, but nevertheless, they continue to operating like commercial banks with AAA status. This leads us to understand that although they continue to provide flexible payment terms, concessional, and money with low interest rates, it seems the money does not reach where it is most needed. And coming from this reality, there are a specific set of facts that we should stress. Nations in the global south currently pay more in debt than they receive in aid. And the trend is only getting more pronounced. If we take a look at the spring meetings minutes and reports, it is staggering to say that analysis coming from the World Bank and the OCDC display that almost $50 billion in 2024 were not received. They did not reach where they were intended to. Further analysis, and if we explore deeper this report, we can say that according to the World Bank projections, the numbers are expected to dip further. In 2023, for instance, they report that instead of the money flowing into global south nations, a net flow of $21.5 billion is projected to have flowed out. And that should be compared with the total amount that was delivered in 2023 of around $130 billion. That's because the head flowing from wealthier donors, has not grown with the need of donor countries. And we are spending more on assisting the refugees coming from domestically problems that have arisen in several countries of the world, keeping aid money within their own borders. Of course, other events like COVID-19 and conflict-driven inflation have already been stressed out, and I will leave that to others. So there is much for concern, and there are three conclusions that are important for CPLP countries. About 60% of low-income countries are either in debt distress or at high risk of getting it. Second conclusion, there is simply not enough money or liquidity for current development needs and to sustain the 2030 development agenda and the sustainable development goals. Third conclusion, and with so many distresses that are emerging, clamoring for donors' attention and generosity, how can funders give effectively when there are multiple crises happening at the same time? But I think there is still room for hope. And if we took a look at the statement coming from the spring meetings of the World Bank, we can see that they have changed their vision statement. Finally, after this long period, they have provided a vision stating that they want to create a world free of poverty on a livable planet. Finally, the concept has aroused the World Bank, and the bank will also focus on 8 global public goods. And I would like to stress public goods because when we say public goods, we are talking about collective responsibility to provide action for them. And they state climate action in first place, fragility and conflict, pandemic preparedness, energy access, food and nutrition security, water security and access, enabling digitalization and protecting biodiversity. This is an agenda for development. And this is not typically what we would read in a World Bank report. On an IDA report, yes, but on a World Bank report, this is not common. But the spring meetings took only a small tap on the back of the governors, and the question remains much the same. How will we find money to implement all these needs? And how can capital be increased for the bank? Does this understanding mean that finally they get it, they get the idea? And why is this important for CPLP? This is important for CPLP because when it comes to resources to foster our common development agenda, we need to have investments in the countries. And the World Bank has invested more in Sub-Saharan Africa than any other region. In Sub-Saharan Africa, in 2023, they invested 38.6 billion. But it's important also for CPLP because some of the member states, particularly in Africa, have debt problems. And it is also important because despite of that, there is a growing competition for new players that have aroused the international scene. You probably know that one of the CPLP member states is part of the BRICS, and in the BRICS initiative, they are creating a group that has been making efforts to reduce its resilience on US dollars in settlements. And they have announced that they will work on creating a payment system based on blockchain and digital technologies. Also, other CPLP member states is a long-standing and sounding member of the European Union, where the euro is, of course, implemented a few years ago. China, with its One Belt, One Road initiative, is now a global player, deploying also money to Africa with no questions asked. And the impact of China in CPLP member countries like Angola and Mozambique, but also in smaller countries like Guinea-Bissau and São Tomé and Príncipe, is rather tangible. Therefore, one of the solutions for CPLP is being open to the world and trying to foster partnerships whenever they emerge, being able to identify and to use multiple and combined funds and financing mechanisms. Someone called this hybrid capital. So money coming or investments coming from the international financial institutions and MDBs, coming from philanthropic organizations, coming from bilateral cooperation agreements, coming from the private sector, coming from debt conversion strategies, and Portugal has an excellent good example to deliver in this area, particularly with Cape Verde and São Tomé and Príncipe, and also national investment coming from new tax statements. And Professor Carlos, sorry, I skipped the name now. The professor from Guinea-Bissau that was the former president of the Commission of Africa. Sorry, I don't remember. He wrote. Yes, Carlos, not Cardoso. He wrote a book a few years ago stating that if Africa delivers more attention to the tax collection on only 1% or 1 point%, they will have more money available to invest in their development than coming from all the international development cooperation. So I think that the CPLP presentation has been passed. Professor Braga de Macedo asked me to talk about associated observers and why is this important for CPLP. Let me go back to this. It was the first map, I think. I was not paying attention. So when you look at this map, you can see that CPLP member states are highlighted in blue, and they are scattered in 4 continents, in Latin America, in Africa, in Europe, and in Asia. If you take a look at the green color, you will see that these 29 countries and 4 international organizations are currently associated observers of CPLP, and as you can see, they are scattered all over the world. And this represents a huge opportunity to foster cooperation in the terms that I previously explained. And if you look to the yellow color, those are the countries that are currently expressing, the countries that are currently expressing interest in assessing CPLP. So there is a tremendous room for cooperation in the areas that you have debated during your event, and that is more perceivable if we look at the next map, where you can see that all the CPLP member states are taking part in regional cooperation mechanisms, and the cooperation emerging from one country that has the experience of working in a specific market, establishing dialogue with the others, explaining how they operate there and how they can create opportunities for the future, is really a huge opportunity for CPLP, and that can be also explored. On the other hand, Professor Braga Macedo also told me to explain to you that besides this status that was created in 2006 of associated observers, we have another status of consultative observers that are organizations coming mainly from the civil society that have approached the CPLP, and they are now divided in thematic commissions, and in those commissions they have the chance to provide insights and to influence really the agenda of CPLP in several areas. And that is the case of this house, the Academy of Sciences, that is running one of these thematic commissions. And linking all this together, we can have the insights coming from the academia to learn a little bit more how to operate and how to dialogue with our associated observers. With our associated observers, we spent a few years in trying to reach the best way to contact with them. And now, in the scope of the partnership that is currently being implemented, we are providing political and diplomatic coordination with these 29 countries and international organizations, not only on bilateral terms, but whenever we are on international fora. We have established partnerships in the implementation of initiatives of common interest aligned with the CPLP general objectives. We have co-financed programs, projects, and specific actions to the contribution of those countries to the CPLP financial mechanisms. It is called the Special Fund. And we are also holding joint events on the context of the international conferences, and where the agenda is shared by all the countries participating in CPLP efforts. So this is really an opportunity to continue to foster cooperation, and I hope that I have at least gathered some interest to find a little bit more about CPLP. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Jorge Braga de Macedo, there's no need for introducing him, but maybe, no?
Madam Chair, do you authorize me to speak from here rather than going to the podium? And I won't use my presentation. I will speak from the heart. The man you mentioned is actually a member of the Academy. So the fact that I don't remember it is incredibly more serious than the fact that you don't remember it. Why did you ask me? I will provide it in the afternoon. It is in the list of members. The reason I am not mentioning for the moment, I will do it this afternoon, God willing, speak about Triffin, is because I believe the link of this academy to the CPLP and to Macau. So this dimension, it's not just a membership, it is, as Mr. Lapin mentioned, it is the fact that there was in Macau the first time that China was looking at the CPLP countries, including Macau. In the meantime, it is also a member of the Academy, who is the rector of the University of Macau, that has become something huge from a little house in the beginning of the century. And so the importance of this particular territory is very significant. The first time that there was a meeting between China and Portuguese-speaking countries in Macau, it must be said that a brilliant a Brazilian diplomat who became executive secretary of CPLP. I'm afraid I only remember his nickname, Zosa, was a minister of the early, the ambassador of the early Lula years. And so he understood completely the importance of CPLP from the standpoint of other international organizations, for example, the OECD, in whose development center I was at the time of this conference. So this is, again, very relevant to include Macau. And of course, I don't need to say this to you. He was the Secretary of State, as I hinted at before, of a member of this academy, António Sousa Franco, a member, as it turns out, that was very active in the writing of some of the texts involving the academy in the 80s. And then he had an unfortunate and premature death. So again, the link of the Academy of Science with countries that speak the Portuguese language is something that has always been at the heart of the Academy, because independently of the Abbey, as he was kindly called by Jefferson, the Academy was responsible for the language. It was responsible, it's a little bit the French tradition, and what we have here is a combination of what you would call the Royal Society and the French Academy. We have two classes, it's how it's called, the class of science and the class of letters, in which, interestingly, you have the economics section, 6L. And to link with the countries and with the organization of CPLP seemed to be something very obvious, but we needed to do it not alone. And so the process was done together with a university called Lusophone University. This word, Lusophonia, does not translate well into English. Lusophony means like phony Luso. Are they referring the water? You know, it doesn't work. But there is a university called Universidade Lusófona, and they are our partners. And this has helped us a lot in our interaction with the CPLP. And we have had a session late last year along these lines. So the diversity of the countries of CPLP is here completely clear. Brazil, the giant, G20. As Renato said yesterday, it has all the weaknesses of the world, and yet it's the country in America that is closer to the United States because of its origin and the fact that the border has been absolutely impeccable, with a little bit of sadness about Sacramento, but let's not get into the gory details. So you have this giant whose interest in CPLP was key at the beginning. You have the PALOP, as they were called, another sort of unfortunate sounding name, African countries with Portuguese as an official language. And the reason why this was said is because, of course, there were many other languages besides the official language. To this group of PALOP was added a former colony of Portugal that in the meantime became, was traded with the Spanish king, Equatorial Guinea, which is now a member of the CPLP as well. So the PALOP are 6 as opposed to 5. Then we have Timor. Again, it was studied at the OECD in 2003 with a group of economists, and the way in which it has evolved in Asia is extremely interesting. At the moment, the only thing that prevents Timor from being a recognized member of the ASEAN and the Chiang Mai system is the fact that there is not in the capital a hotel big enough to host, in a way, in an Asian way, I was going to say, all the members, Indonesia and so on. So it's almost comical, but it's very much, it reflects very much the kind of miracle, let's say, of the independence of Timor. And they are very active. Ramos Horta is the current president, is a member of the academy because when he was here as a scholar, and we have a regular relationship with the country. I should introduce a small footnote. There was a program, PhD program in so-called, it was called Tropic Man, as a combination of tropical knowledge, okay, and management offered at Nova School of Business and Economics. Could you confirm that?
Yes, it's a PhD program.
It was.
With many.
It was. The funding has finished.
It's a pity that.
Yes, it is a pity, but it worked. And again, we had people from, we had people from Timor. So
not only from all.
No, of course. Most of them were from Africa, but we did have some from Timor. This is what I am trying. This is what I'm trying to stress. And so this is specific, perhaps, or is one of the things that we are hoping to advance. And the collaboration with the Lusophone University has gone well, but there is still a lot more to do. And so it was a bit of a daring thing to bring it to the Robert Triffin Foundation. I am saying foundation, but I think it was a lapsus because it's an international. It is whatever it is, but it's international, to avoid the idea that Robert Triffin is just Belgian or just American. Anyway, the Academy is very keen on promoting the relations with CPLP, and this has been something I have indulged enormously. So much so that the brief presentation I had called Triffin Redux, I will leave it for this afternoon And I'm sure please all of you by saying that except for questions from the floor, as far as we are concerned, we convinced you that CPLP matters for reasons that go beyond the will of ministers and their what do you call, what do you consider yourself an expert, perhaps? And that this happens not just in Europe, in the European Union, that we know very well, but also in such a diverse organization as the Community of Portuguese-speaking countries. Do we still have time for questions? A debate? Do you want to? No. No. I'm done.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, it's time to collect the questions on this session. So please, from the floor.
Please,
Oh yes, it is.
The member from Guinea is Carlos Lopes. Is mostly in South Africa at RAN, but sorry, this I had what you call we call this a senior moment in Portugal, you know, or I think it's American.
I would like to say I quoted Carlos Lopes frequently because he's quite an anthropologist also,
Thank you.
and with a long historical knowledge, particularly on Guinea. Yes, it's yeah, Carlos Lopes. Yes. Well, questions on this session, if you please. I have one, but I would not like to benefit from my position to raise my question. Please.
Thank you. Thank you very much. A question on Macau. The Pataka. Usman Mandeng. Thank you. The Pataka is fixed to the US dollar, and the same, of course, is true for the Hong Kong dollar. Do you see that China is moving towards, repegging the Pataka maybe to the renminbi in the relatively short term future? And if not, why not?
More questions to collect? Thank you. Please.
By the way, we are not stopping for the last question is yours. The last comment is yours.
Okay. My name is Vasil Krajinov. I'm from Bulgaria. Not to make the mistake with the other person. Okay. So my question is to Mr. Gimmers. I'm sorry if I don't, Christian Gimmers. I'm sorry if I don't pronounce it correctly, but in your proposal with different steps, you didn't touch the problem with the government budget deficits. In fact, the budget deficits which were run by the US government was one of the causes for the end of the Bretton Woods. And if we continue with budget deficits, would your proposal work, or you have a remedy for the budget deficits too? Thank you.
More questions, please.
Thanks. Just an addendum to Osman Mandeng's question. Would you ever consider pegging the currency of Macau to the SDR instead of choosing the dollar as it is now or the renminbi?
More questions? Well.
No. Bernard is preparing his question.
Are you?
He wants to be sure. Take your time. faut poser une question. Sinon, on s'en va pas.
Well, I will react very briefly to what Christian Guimers said. And from my own experience, and perhaps the experience of other people around here, in the preparation of the Maastricht Treaty, and the experience of my father in the preparation of the Rome Treaty, it is true that the essence is to create a complicity between representatives of countries at, let's say, intermediate level, but perhaps not the pure technicians. And I think, to be honest, that diplomats can be sometimes assimilated to the level of technicians. But there is I have one different, and this complicity has played a huge role in being able to reach an agreement. But in the experience of the Rome Treaty, if you only leave the technicians to themselves, there is no guarantee that they will definitely attain the objective, because technicians have also a tendency to see obstacles, because sometimes they are paid to know all the obstacles and the differences. And at some point, you need leadership. I don't think the Treaty of Rome, for instance, would have been signed if the committee of experts created after the conference of Messina had not been chaired by a politician. But that politician, sorry to say so, a Belgian politician, was Paul-Henri Spaak, who had a clear vision of where he wanted to land. And so we have a little bit to combine the methodology that Christian proposed with leadership. So the two elements, and sometimes the politicians has to come out. Sometimes I'm afraid it is somebody from a country that is not too big, and therefore is not seen as having too much of its own interest to promote, to reach a situation that at the end is good for all of them. Thank you.
And now, from the presenters, if you please. Maybe perhaps Macau first and immediately after.
If I understood well, I think that basically the two questions about Macau, they are very alike. So I think that I can answer it simultaneously. I would say the following. First of all, I have to repeat my disclaimer in the sense that I'm here representing a commercial and issue bank in Macau, not the local authorities, and of course they would be, for sure, the ones that could, with different legitimacy, answer that question. So whatever I can say is just a personal opinion, is not nothing that could be understood as official at all. I would say very briefly the following. I would say that, first of all, I believe that the reasons why the pegging is with the US dollar, they maintain valid. So I would not expect in the short term anything to change in that regard. That would be surprisingly a surprise to me if that would change. Having said that, of course, if you ask locally the Chinese authorities, in the long term, I think they will not be unhappy if things would change in the future. But I would not expect any change in that regard as a way to enhance or to enlarge the internationalization of RMB, but just the opposite. That could be an outcome if and when that goal is achieved. That I would say. So very briefly, I don't expect, would be a surprise to be any change in that regard. It's valid to both questions. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Two questions. So the first from our colleague from Bulgaria. The fact is that we cannot continue to depend upon the possibility of the US economy to incur more debt. This is absolutely impossible. In a shorter term, I would say from now to 5 years, this is impossible. The advantage of making IMF able to issue as a liability genuine multilateral safe assets is that these safe assets are not a debt because it has exactly the counterpart on the asset side of the central bank, of the IMF balance sheet. Exactly as a central bank at national level has no debt. It has a liability fully compensated by the asset side. So the debt is not a problem. It's only a problem in a key currency system, which is impossible to continue much more time. First question. Second question about Bernard, you are totally right. Remember that I said that I wanted to be provocative for making pedagogically clear. What I mean is that obviously I don't play, this would be, as a technician, I know that it was horrible, a world managed by technicians. I know what I am saying. What I pretend to do is a two-tier system in interrelation. So the technician level is preparing the technical content, the analysis, the report, and in certain circumstances to allow to make recommendations when they have a consensus view. This helps very much the minister, but the minister has to decide on one side, and as you mentioned correctly, to, in some historical moment, to take the leadership. And you're right that without Paul-Henri Spaak, the Belgian member or minister on that time, effectively, the role of the technician would have been lost. You're right. But not because they were too trapped in obstacle. No, because the element of leadership was absolutely necessary on that time. So you are totally right. And remember, what I have in mind is a two-tier system. Now, I abuse my time for mentioning, why did I mention José Correa da Serra? Because this man was, in fact, a member of a large number of scientific academy in Europe. And how I know this name is because he was a member of the Academy of Science of my original city in Belgium, which is Liège, Lüttich in German. He was an active member, not just in Liège, but in the whole France, in Bordeaux, in Marseille, in the northern, in Lille, I think, and other countries. He was a real European humanist. So this has to be mentioned because very few people know this brilliant Portuguese enlightenment, and it was very important. He had to leave the Napoleonic dictatorship to be protected by the US.
Well,
Nothing to say.
nobody asked questions to you? No? No?
Well, I want to, we will visit the academy and you will see what is called the Abbey Room. And it is in the name of this founder that you mentioned was, as I hinted, both a member of the Royal Society and the French Academy and many others. But I would be remiss if I would not apply what Bernard told us about the Treaty of Rome to the Treaty of Maastricht. And why do I say that? Because it was something that Delors achieved in a different way. But in a way that for us Portuguese was extremely important, because he was able to combine the joint membership of the two Iberian neighbors, so close yet so far. That is a victory. And the other point which I want to stress about Jacques Delors was that he managed to understand each one of the members on their own right, with one exception, to which I will come very quickly. So there is this episode. How did all this happen? It all started in Germany, obviously. And then there was an issue about the reluctance of the United Kingdom. Very strong reluctance. So at a meeting in Italy, where Andreotti was the president of the council, because Margaret Thatcher it was so clear that she was against just about anything, that when Andreotti prepared the so-called confessional, this has been mentioned very recently in a podcast, I can mention it later, but he would talk to everyone, but since he knew exactly what she thought, he did not talk to her. And when the vote came, everybody said yes, and for once in a lifetime, Margaret Thatcher kept quiet. This is a victory of Andreotti, without which there would not have been the Maastricht Treaty. And why was the Maastricht Treaty signed in Maastricht? Because, of course, the Dutch, as we know, worked a lot on the details, but they left to the Portuguese the end of the story, and it was during the Portuguese presidency that the final text was agreed. And our Prime Minister at the time, who was also a founder of the Nova School of Business and Economics, let me add, he said, well, you know, you helped so much, you were so, you know, helpful, that why don't we do it in Maastricht? Because, you know, you work on it. The Germans returned the courtesy. Why is the Treaty of Lisbon called Treaty of Lisbon when it took place during a German presidency? They were following the good habits. And now I learned today that everything started with Spock and with your dad. The importance of a dad. Okay, thank you very much. Now we go to lunch. Oh, no, sorry.
May I say something?
I give it to mommy.
No. If I may say something, I think we are approaching perhaps one of the most relevant aspects of our discussions from yesterday to today, which has to do with the question, till what extent political cohesion is required, or at least some complicity, as someone said, for monetary unions to be successful, or for monetary unions to work properly. In fact, if you look at the past, we have the good examples of the American monetary union, which was so well studied, and there are publications and the studies by Vitor Gaspar. We had the case of the unifications of Germany and Italy, all of them successful, but we have so many others which failed. And the case of the Latin monetary union, the Scandinavian, or at least they lasted for short periods of time. So till what extent these aspects of diplomacy, of course, but much more than that, common interests and the exploration of the political aspects of common positions are in fact the decisive point for this purpose. we began yesterday. We also approached so much today, but perhaps this is an open question. Maybe we have the afternoon session to go on. Thank you very much for this session.